Admiral Nexus stood on the bridge of his massive starship, watching the blue and green planet below through the observation deck. His 4 eyes studied the primitive world with mild curiosity. The species living there had barely managed to send small metal objects beyond their atmosphere using controlled explosions. Another backward planet, he muttered to himself, his tentacles moving across the control panel with practiced ease. The ship's computers had been analyzing this system for several hours now, cataloging everything from the planet's gravity to the electromagnetic signatures coming from its surface. The third planet from the local star showed signs of intelligent life, but the kind that still burned chemical fuel to move around. Nexus had seen thousands of worlds like this during his long career with the hegemony fleet. They all followed the same predictable pattern: primitive chemical rockets, then fusion drives, then maybe basic energy weapons if they were lucky enough to survive their own stupidity. Commander Vex, he called to his second-in-command, a shorter alien with 6 arms who was busy organizing data tablets near the navigation station. Yes, Admiral? Vex looked up from his work, his purple skin shimmering under the bridge lights. What do our scans show about the inhabitants of the third planet? Vex consulted his data pad, scrolling through pages of information. They call themselves humans, sir. Carbon-based bipeds, average lifespan of about 80 local years. They appear to have achieved basic industrial technology approximately 200 of their years ago. Nexus nodded slowly. The timeline was typical for developing species. And their current technological level? Primitive chemical propulsion for space travel. They have managed to place small satellites in orbit and send a few expeditions to their natural satellite. No evidence of energy weapons or defensive shields. Their most advanced projectile weapons still use chemical explosives. The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in what passed for amusement among his species. Chemical explosives. He remembered reading about such things in historical texts about the ancient wars. Even his own people had used similar weapons thousands of years ago, back when they were still confined to their home planet. Any signs of faster-than-light communication or travel research? He asked, though he already knew the answer. None whatsoever, sir. They appear to be completely unaware that space travel beyond their local system is possible. Our monitoring stations have detected no attempts at superluminal communication. Nexus walked to the large viewing window that dominated one wall of the bridge. Below them, the planet rotated slowly, showing continents and oceans that looked remarkably similar to dozens of other worlds he had catalogued over the centuries. The night side sparkled with tiny lights, cities probably, though primitive ones that still relied on electrical illumination. Begin standard classification procedures, he ordered. File them under primitive species category. Vex's fingers moved quickly across his data pad. What number should I assign them, sir? Let me think. Nexus consulted his own records. The last primitive species we catalogued was that silicon-based civilization in the Keth sector. That was number 47,290. So these humans will be primitive species number 47,291. Classification code assigned, sir. What about threat assessment? The Admiral's laughter was a series of clicking sounds that echoed through the bridge. Several crew members looked up from their duties, surprised by the unusual sound. It had been months since anything had amused the Admiral enough to make him laugh. Threat assessment? He repeated. Vex, these creatures are still strapping themselves to controlled explosions just to escape their planet's gravity well. They pose about as much threat to the Confederation as a newborn plasma worm. Negligible threat level recorded, sir. Good. Now, what's your estimate for their technological development timeline? Vex pulled up comparison charts on his screen, showing the development curves of hundreds of other species the Confederation had encountered over the millennia. Based on standard progression models, sir, I would estimate they will achieve basic faster-than-light travel in approximately 800 to 1,000 standard cycles. Nexus nodded approvingly. That timeline would put first contact still centuries in the future, long after his current tour of duty ended. Some other admiral would have the responsibility of dealing with these humans when they finally became interesting enough to merit direct contact. File the complete report in the standard database, he instructed. Schedule them for re-evaluation in 500 cycles, just to see if they're progressing faster than expected. Already done, sir. The automated monitoring stations will keep track of their major technological developments and alert us if anything unusual occurs. Through the observation window, Nexus could see one of the humans' primitive rockets launching from the planet's surface. It left a trail of fire and smoke as it struggled against gravity, carrying what was probably a small satellite or perhaps a few of their astronauts. The sight was almost nostalgic, reminding him of his own species' humble beginnings so many eons ago. Remarkable how they all start the same way, he mused aloud. Chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, basic electronics. It's like the universe follows a template for developing intelligence. Should we establish a monitoring post in this system, sir? Vex asked. No need. The automated sensors we've placed on the outer planets will be sufficient. These humans won't be worth our attention for at least 8 centuries. The Admiral took one last look at the primitive world below before turning away from the viewing window. Earth joined the vast catalog of worlds that might someday be worthy of consideration for membership in the Galactic Confederation, assuming its inhabitants didn't destroy themselves first. As the hegemony fleet's ships prepared to depart for their next survey mission, the humans below continued their simple existence, completely unaware they had just been observed, classified, and dismissed by a civilization that spanned the galaxy. Captain Hannah's patrol ship drifted silently through the dark space between star systems, following the same route she had traveled dozens of times before. Her mission was simple and boring: check the automated monitoring stations, verify that primitive species were developing according to predicted timelines, and file routine reports that nobody would read for decades. The Sol system appeared on her navigation screen as just another stop on a long list. She remembered the file from her training: primitive species 47,291 humans, expected to achieve basic space travel in about 750 more cycles. Nothing interesting ever happened during these routine checks. But as her ship's sensors began their automatic scan of the system, something made her sit up straight in her command chair. The readings were wrong. They had to be wrong. Computer, run full diagnostics on all sensor arrays, she ordered, her voice tight with confusion. The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately. All sensor systems functioning within normal parameters, Captain. No malfunctions detected. Hannah stared at the data streaming across her screens. According to her instruments, the third planet in this system was generating massive electromagnetic signatures. Not the simple radio waves and electrical activity she expected from a primitive civilization, but enormous energy discharges that registered like weapon systems. This is impossible, she whispered, leaning forward to study the readings more carefully. The electromagnetic patterns were unlike anything in the Confederation's extensive databases. These weren't the clean energy signatures of plasma cannons or particle beam weapons. Instead, they looked like something far more primitive yet somehow more powerful: massive magnetic coils accelerating solid objects to incredible velocities. She ordered her ship to move closer to the inner system, staying far enough away to avoid detection but close enough for detailed scans. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about technological development. The humans had built enormous installations on their planet's surface and in orbit around it. These structures were clearly weapons, but they operated on principles that the Confederation had abandoned thousands of years ago. Instead of generating energy beams or plasma bolts, these devices used powerful magnetic fields to launch solid projectiles at velocities that made her instruments scream warnings. Computer, analyze the kinetic energy of those projectile launches. Analysis complete, Captain. Estimated velocity of launched objects approaches 12% of light speed. Kinetic energy levels exceed standard plasma cannon output by factor of 8. Hannah felt her breathing quicken. 12% of light speed. Even her own ship's defensive shields were designed primarily to deflect energy weapons and fast-moving debris, not solid objects traveling at such incredible velocities. She watched in fascination and growing alarm as the humans conducted what appeared to be test firings. Massive metal rods launched from orbital platforms struck targets on uninhabited asteroids, completely vaporizing rocks the size of small moons. The sheer destructive power was staggering. Begin recording all data, she commanded. Prepare emergency transmission to High Command. Her report took hours to compile. She documented every observation, included detailed sensor readings, and attached visual recordings of the human weapons in action. The message she sent was marked with the highest priority codes available to a scout captain. The response came back within days, much faster than she had expected. Supreme Commander Chris himself had reviewed her report. Scout Captain Hannah, the message began, your recent transmission from the Sol system contains significant sensor errors. Recommend immediate maintenance of all detection equipment. No primitive species develops kinetic weapons as primary armament systems. Energy shield technology renders such concepts obsolete. Report to Starbase 7 for equipment inspection. Hannah read the message 3 times, her anger growing with each word. Equipment malfunction. Sensor errors. They thought she was incompetent. She ran every diagnostic test available twice. Every system checked out perfectly. The readings were accurate, but her superiors refused to believe what they clearly showed. Over the following months, she continued to monitor the Sol system during her regular patrol routes. Each visit revealed new developments that should have terrified the Confederation leadership. The humans were not content with their ground-based and orbital weapons. They had begun moving asteroids, reshaping them into massive kinetic weapon platforms. She watched them hollow out space rocks the size of mountains, installing the same electromagnetic acceleration system she had first observed. These mobile weapons platforms could be positioned anywhere in their solar system, creating overlapping fields of fire that could destroy entire fleets. Her subsequent reports grew increasingly urgent. She documented the construction of at least 40 asteroid weapon platforms. She recorded test firings that launched projectiles clear out of the Sol system at velocities approaching 15% of light speed. She even detected signs that the humans were experimenting with launching multiple projectiles simultaneously, creating deadly swarms of kinetic weapons. Each report received the same response: filed and dismissed. Her superiors at high command had decided that her sensors were malfunctioning, and no amount of evidence would convince them otherwise. The most troubling discovery came during her final authorized visit to the system. The humans had somehow obtained fragments of Confederation technology. She detected familiar energy signatures mixed with their primitive electromagnetic weapons. Somehow, they had acquired pieces of crashed monitoring drones and were incorporating advanced materials into their kinetic systems. Her emergency transmission about this development was answered with transfer orders. She was being reassigned to a desk job at a remote supply depot, effectively ending her career as a scout captain. As her ship departed the Sol system for the last time under her command, Hannah took one final look at the sensor readings. The humans had accelerated their development beyond anything in Confederation records. They had weaponized concepts that no other species had ever considered militarily viable. And absolutely nobody with the power to act was willing to listen to her warnings. The file on primitive species 47,291 remained unchanged in the Confederation databases, still predicting first contact centuries in the future, while the humans below continued building weapons that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Dr. Jiho rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. He had been working in the radio telescope facility for 16 hours straight, listening to signals from deep space. Most nights brought nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional burst from a distant pulsar, but tonight was different. The signal had started as a faint whisper among the static, so weak that the computer almost filtered it out automatically. But something about the pattern caught his attention. It was too regular, too organized to be natural phenomena. Computer, isolate signal frequency 847.3 and boost amplification, he commanded. The speakers crackled as the computer enhanced the transmission. What emerged was clearly artificial structured bursts of data that followed mathematical patterns. Someone or something was broadcasting across interstellar space. Jiho's hands trembled slightly as he began the decoding process. Humanity had been searching for signs of alien intelligence for over a century, and he might be the first person to find proof that we were not alone in the universe. The translation software worked slowly, comparing the signal patterns against every known language and mathematical system. After 3 hours of processing, words began to appear on his screen. The aliens were speaking in concepts that human computers could barely understand, but the basic meaning was becoming clear. Sol system. Primitive species 47,291. Scheduled integration. Minimal resistance expected. Jiho's blood ran cold as he read the translated fragments. The transmission was a routine military report, discussing Earth as if it were just another item on a bureaucratic checklist. He worked through the night, capturing and decoding as much of the alien communication as possible. By dawn, he had assembled a terrifying picture of humanity's situation. A vast galactic civilization had been watching Earth for decades. They had cataloged humans as a primitive species, numbered like specimens in a laboratory. The worst part was the casual tone of their discussions. These aliens talked about integration of human civilization the way people might discuss renovating an old building. They expected no resistance, no complications, just another routine expansion of their empire. Jiho immediately contacted Global Defense Coordinator Mina through secure channels. She arrived at the facility within hours, accompanied by a small team of military advisors and cryptography experts. "Show me everything," she said without preamble. Jiho presented his findings, playing the decoded transmissions and displaying the translated text. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. "They're watching us," Jiho explained, pointing to specific sections of the intercepted messages. "They have monitoring stations somewhere in our solar system, probably on the outer planets. And they consider us completely irrelevant." General Park, one of Mina's advisors, leaned forward. "What do you mean by integration?" "From what I can tell, it's their standard procedure for dealing with primitive civilizations. They show up with overwhelming force, demand submission, and absorb the planet into their confederation. They've done this thousands of times before." Mina studied the translations carefully. "When?" "The timeline is unclear, but based on their discussions they're planning to make contact within the next few years, not decades or centuries." The room erupted in urgent discussions. Humanity had always assumed that first contact with aliens would be a diplomatic event, an exchange between equals. Instead, they faced conquest by a civilization that viewed them as barely worth noticing. "We need to accelerate Project Longshot immediately," Mina declared. "If these aliens expect primitive weapons and easy conquest, we're going to surprise them." Project Longshot had been humanity's best-kept secret for over a decade. While the world focused on traditional space exploration and scientific research, a small group of engineers and military planners had been developing something entirely different. They had weaponized the same electromagnetic principles used in particle accelerators, creating orbital platforms capable of launching solid projectiles at incredible velocities. The project had grown slowly, funded through black budgets and hidden research programs. Most world leaders knew only that significant resources were being devoted to advanced space defense research. The full scope of the weapon system was known to fewer than 100 people worldwide. Within weeks of Jiho's discovery, construction crews were working around the clock to complete the railgun installations. Manufacturing facilities that had been producing components at a steady pace suddenly shifted to emergency production schedules. The breakthrough came when engineers examining wreckage from a crashed satellite discovered that it wasn't human technology at all. The debris contained materials and components that were clearly of alien origin, fragments from one of the monitoring drones that had been watching Earth. Dr. Sujin led the team analyzing the alien technology. "These materials are incredible," she reported to Mina. "Their superconductors are more efficient than anything we've ever developed. If we can incorporate these into our railgun systems, we can achieve projectile velocities we never thought possible." The reverse engineering process took months of careful work. Human scientists had to understand alien technology that was centuries more advanced than their own, then figure out how to integrate it with their kinetic weapon systems. Meanwhile, Jiho continued monitoring alien communications. He intercepted increasingly urgent reports from a scout captain named Hannah, warning her superiors about human weapons development. Her descriptions of electromagnetic acceleration systems and asteroid-mounted weapons platforms painted an accurate picture of Project Longshot. But the alien high command dismissed every warning. Their responses were predictable and arrogant, refusing to believe that a primitive species could develop effective weapons using concepts they considered obsolete. "Impossible," came the repeated reply from Supreme Commander Chris. "Their technology is millennia behind ours. Prepare standard integration protocols." As Jiho listened to these transmissions, he realized that humanity had gained an enormous advantage. The aliens were so convinced of their superiority that they couldn't recognize a genuine threat when their own scouts reported it directly. The final pieces of Project Longshot came online just as alien fleet movements suggested that first contact was imminent. Humanity had transformed from a primitive species into a civilization capable of defending itself, while their future conquerors remained convinced that resistance was impossible. Fleet Commander Dae-sung stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the main viewing screen. Behind him stretched a formation of 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of Confederation engineering that had taken decades to build and cost more resources than entire star systems produced in a year. This was supposed to be a routine operation. Standard Integration Protocol for Primitive Species 47291. Show overwhelming force, broadcast submission demands, accept the inevitable surrender, and welcome another world into the Confederation. He had performed this same procedure 17 times during his long career, and it always followed the same predictable pattern. "Communications officer, open channels to the primitive planet," he ordered, settling into his command chair with casual confidence. "All frequencies open, Commander." Broadcasting on their primary communication bands. Dae-sung activated the standard integration message that had been used successfully for centuries. His voice carried the authority of a galactic civilization that spanned thousands of worlds and commanded technologies beyond the comprehension of primitive species. Primitive species of Sol 3, he began, his words being translated into the crude languages used by the humans below. You will submit to Confederation authority and cease all military activities immediately. Your planet has been selected for integration into our galactic community. Resistance is futile and will result in unnecessary destruction. You have 1 standard hour to broadcast your unconditional surrender on all frequencies. He paused, waiting for the transmission to reach the planet and for the predictable response. Usually, primitive species either surrendered immediately upon seeing the size of his fleet, or they attempted some pathetic gesture of defiance using their crude chemical weapons before realizing how hopeless their situation was. Commander, his tactical officer reported, I'm detecting unusual electromagnetic activity from multiple locations throughout this solar system. Daesung frowned slightly. Explain. Large-scale magnetic field fluctuations, sir. Almost like weapons charging, but the energy patterns don't match any known weapon systems in our databases. Impossible. These primitives barely have functional space travel. What could they possibly dash? The tactical officer's console erupted in warning alarms. Commander. Incoming projectiles. Multiple launches from everywhere. Daesung's eyes widened as his sensors revealed the truth. Massive electromagnetic signatures were appearing throughout the solar system, not just from the planet, but from asteroids, space stations, and hidden installations scattered across the entire system. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Raise shields, he commanded. All ships, maximum defensive posture. But even as he gave the order, he realized something was terribly wrong. These weren't energy weapons approaching his fleet. The sensors showed solid objects, massive metal rods accelerating to velocities that made his mind reel. The first projectile struck the heavy cruiser Nexus Prime at 15% of light speed. The ship's energy shields, designed to deflect plasma bolts and particle beams, might as well have been made of paper. The tungsten rod punched through the shield like it wasn't there, tore through the hull armor as if it were tissue paper, and emerged from the other side trailing debris and atmosphere. The cruiser simply disintegrated. A ship that had taken 40 years to construct and housed 3,000 crew members became an expanding cloud of metal fragments in less than a second. Impossible, Daesung whispered, watching his sensors register impact after impact as more projectiles found their targets. The human weapons were brutally simple. No exotic energy fields, no complex particle acceleration systems, no quantum entanglement devices. Just massive chunks of dense metal accelerated to relativistic speeds by electromagnetic fields. The Confederation had abandoned such primitive concepts millennia ago in favor of more elegant energy weapons. But elegance meant nothing when a tungsten rod traveling at 45,000 kilometers per second hit your ship. The kinetic energy was so enormous that molecular bonds simply ceased to exist at the impact point. Commander, his communications officer shouted over the chaos. We're receiving transmissions from the planet. Put it through. A human voice filled the bridge, speaking in accented but clear Confederation standard. Alien fleet, this is Admiral Kyung of Earth Defense Command. You came here expecting to find primitives armed with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. Instead, you found a civilization that has spent 50 years preparing for this moment. Your energy shields are useless against kinetic weapons. Your plasma cannons cannot target objects moving at these velocities. Surrender now, or we will continue the bombardment. Daesung watched in horror as another wave of projectiles swept through his formation. The humans had calculated everything perfectly. They knew exactly how fast his ships could maneuver, exactly how his defensive systems worked, exactly where to target for maximum destruction. His own flagship shuddered as a tungsten rod passed close enough to strip away several outer hull sections. The near miss was clearly intentional, a demonstration that the humans could have destroyed his command ship just as easily as they had obliterated dozens of others. All ships, retreat formation, he ordered. Emergency jump to minimum safe distance. But as his surviving vessels began to accelerate away from the planet, more electromagnetic signatures appeared on his sensors. The humans had installations throughout their solar system, positioned to cover every possible escape route. Sir, his navigator reported, we're detecting launcher signatures from the outer planets. They've got us in a crossfire pattern that covers the entire system. Daesung realized with growing horror that the humans had been planning this engagement for decades. They had studied Confederation technology, analyzed their tactics, and designed weapons specifically to counter everything his civilization had developed over millions of years of galactic expansion. The irony was overwhelming. His technologically superior fleet, armed with the most advanced weapons in known space, was being systematically destroyed by what amounted to rocks thrown very fast by creatures his civilization had classified as primitives. Another barrage of kinetic projectiles tore through his remaining ships. The humans weren't just defeating his fleet, they were annihilating it with weapons that his people had considered obsolete since their own Bronze Age. Admiral Sola watched the tactical display from her command center deep beneath Earth's surface. The alien fleet was breaking apart under the first wave of kinetic strikes, but several dozen ships were still intact and trying to escape the solar system. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, and she would not let a single enemy vessel carry word of humanity's capabilities back to their galactic empire. "Activate all outer system installations," she commanded, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was unleashing. Across the solar system, installations that had been disguised as mining operations, research stations, and communication relays revealed their true purpose. The massive structures built into Jupiter's moons began to hum with electromagnetic energy. Similar weapons hidden throughout the asteroid belt came online simultaneously. Project Longshot was far more extensive than even most government leaders knew. For decades, humanity had been secretly transforming their entire solar system into a defensive network. Every major moon, asteroid, and artificial station concealed railgun systems capable of launching projectiles at velocities approaching 20% of light speed. "Tracking alien escape vectors," reported Commander Min from the targeting station. 17 ships attempting to flee through the outer system. Calculating intercept trajectories now. The fleeing Confederation vessels were moving fast, but they were still bound by the same physics that governed all matter in the universe. No matter how advanced their technology, they could not simply vanish or teleport away from danger. "Fire when ready," Admiral Sola ordered. The weapons hidden in Jupiter's moon system launched their deadly cargo. Massive tungsten rods, each one weighing several tons and accelerated to incredible velocities, began their journey across the solar system. The aliens had hours to live, but they didn't know it yet. Fleet Commander Daesung's flagship was limping away from Earth, its hull breached in dozens of places and half its crew dead or dying. He had managed to gather the survivors of his once mighty fleet, but barely 30 ships remained operational out of the 200 he had brought to conquer this primitive world. "Maximum velocity," he ordered his helmsman. "We must reach minimum jump distance before they can target us again." His tactical officer looked up from the sensor display with confusion. "Sir, I'm detecting new launches from the outer planets. Multiple projectiles incoming from Jupiter?" Daesung felt his heart sink. The humans had weapons positioned throughout their entire solar system. There would be no escape, no chance to warn the Confederation about what they faced here. The first projectile struck the heavy cruiser Harmony at 18% of light speed. The ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized by kinetic energy levels that exceeded the output of small stars. More impacts followed in rapid succession as the human weapons found their targets with mechanical precision. "How is this possible?" Daesung whispered, watching his remaining ships die one by one. "They're primitives. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours." His communications officer, working at a damaged console, managed to establish contact with the few surviving vessels. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. Does anyone have operational jump drives?" The responses came back negative. The human weapons had specifically targeted propulsion systems, stranding the aliens in a solar system that had become their tomb. Dr. Jiho sat in his communications center, monitoring the alien distress signals. The arrogance that had characterized their earlier transmissions was gone, replaced by panic and disbelief. "This is impossible," came one transmission from the alien flagship. "How did primitives achieve tactical superiority? Our civilization spans millennia. We have conquered thousands of worlds." Jiho activated the deep space broadcasting array and transmitted his response across all Confederation frequencies. He wanted every alien civilization in the galaxy to hear humanity's message. "Alien fleet, this is Dr. Jiho of Earth's Defense Command. You came here expecting to find primitives who would surrender without a fight. You catalogued us as primitive species 47,291 and planned our integration into your empire like we were just another item on a checklist." He paused, watching the tactical display as the last alien ships were systematically destroyed by projectiles launched from across the solar system. "You ignored the warnings from your own scouts. Captain Hannah tried to tell your leaders that we had developed effective kinetic weapons, but you dismissed her reports as equipment malfunctions. You refused to believe that primitives could create something your advanced civilization hadn't considered. The final alien ship, Fleet Commander Daesung's flagship, was drifting powerless as another tungsten rod approached at 17% of light speed. You dismissed our capabilities because they didn't match your expectations. You assumed that advanced meant better, that energy weapons were superior to kinetic systems. But you forgot the most important lesson in warfare. It doesn't matter how sophisticated your defenses are if your enemy attacks in a way you never prepared for. The last projectile struck home, and the alien flagship joined the expanding debris field that had once been the Confederation's integration fleet. Earth remembers this lesson, Jiho continued his broadcast. We will not be catalogued, numbered, or integrated. Any civilization that approaches our system with hostile intent will face the same fate as this fleet. You have been warned. Admiral Sola joined the transmission from her command center. To any alien civilizations receiving this message, know that humanity is no longer a primitive species hiding on a single planet. We are beginning construction of interstellar kinetic weapons platforms. Our reach now extends beyond our solar system. As the broadcast ended, construction ships were already moving toward the edge of the solar system, carrying components for the first generation of interstellar railguns. These new weapons would be able to target enemy fleets before they could even enter human space. The galaxy had learned a harsh lesson. Sometimes the most devastating weapons weren't the most advanced ones. They were the ones your enemy never saw coming.